Welcome back to the 2024 Tire Rack One Lap of America, presented by Grassroots Motorsport Magazine, with coverage brought to you by Hooked on Driving, Daily Driver, and the Valente Group. I'm Solomon, that's Bryan, and tonight we have a couple of guests who we're very keen to talk to. You may have heard us talk about it in the previous, kickoff video. So we're going to be speaking with Andrew and Chad. Andrew, why don't you come on out? Andrew, what are you looking for this year? And a few words. Chad, what about you? They're telling me that they're late for their interview and we're probably going to have to reschedule. So in the meantime, for stand-in Andrew and Chad, I'm Solomon, that's Bryan. Don't be late. Take care. Welcome back to the 2024 Tire Rack One Lap of America, presented by Grassroots Motorsport Magazine, with coverage this year brought to you by Hooked on Driving, Everyday Driver, and the Valente Group. Bryan and I are today with Andrew and Chad of Team PGR, correct? Is it still
That's
Team
it.
PGR?
Still Team PGR.
How many years is this for you guys?
This will be year 5. Not
Okay.
contiguously. There was a pandemic in the way, but this will be year 5.
Very cool. So you guys are obviously infamous in our circle, at least, for running a very modern vehicle, an electric vehicle, boogie woogie woogie, the Tesla. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the vehicle itself and everything that's gone into developing it over the years?
Go for it, Chad.
So we did the first 2 years in a Model 3. And we quickly realized, as great a platform as that is, it just wasn't as competitive as we wanted it to be. So we switched to a Model S Plaid when that came out in 2021, developed it over the winter for the 22 run, and ran it again last year. And so this will be year 3 on that platform.
And it's sort of, I've seen it evolve over these few years now. So from when you started running the vehicle to today, what are the main changes that the car's undergone?
Yeah, the Model 3 that we ran the first time was basically stock. There wasn't a lot of development of parts at the time, and yeah, we just wanted to see what it could do stock. Second time we ran it, we had made quite a few changes. One of our main sponsors is Mountain Pass Performance up in Toronto. Sasha is the lead guy there, and they had done a bunch of development on the car, and so we ran a bunch of parts, and like Chad said, that made it better. It's super fun to drive. However, it wasn't going to be competitive. So this Plaid, we gave it to Sasha, I don't know, what was it, Chad, like within a week of getting it, maybe 2 weeks, something like that. And yeah, he had it for most of the winter, and we got it back right before that first run. Did a test day or two, and so it's significant. The big things that people talk about the Teslas are the brakes. So it had significant changes to the brakes, pads, rotors, and then when Sasha got a hold of it, it didn't even have track mode yet. That's kind of a Tesla thing too, right? They get some sort of minimal product out the door, and then they improve it over time with software. So he's played with the software a bit. We have like a Motec in the car, what people use a lot of the time in gas cars to do all the fueling. Well, we use that to data log. So it's got that in it. And then he was having so much fun with it, he kind of went further than we originally intended, and he switched out the entire air suspension. So it has 3-way KW coilovers that Sasha custom spec'd. And then he did some aero stuff too. Again, he was having fun. So front splitter, which is pretty nice custom carbon part that he made, and then also a pretty big wing on the back, actually probably too big. We have it trimmed out most of the time. And then, yeah, since those first couple days of testing, we've continued to play with it. The big thing last year, and actually for all the cars, is that the pack eventually just runs out of heat capacity, and you start to lose power. So like for us, we're kind of managing the entire time trying to figure out, well, what power can we run and still make it to the 3 laps? with good lap times. So last year we did a bunch of engineering effort. Chad did a bunch of work on the front to try and get the cooling increased, our ability to get rid of heat out of the pack. It seems like it does help, but it doesn't help like a lot. So that was interesting. I don't think anybody else has tried that anywhere in the world. And then as part of that, we actually changed some of the hood stuff too, right? Cut a hole in the hood so that the air can go up and out. Did some venting of the fenders a little bit. So even though the goal was to, pull heat out of the car, actually it made the aero better. The car, like the faster you go now, the more the car goes down to the ground rather than kind of feeling like it's a little floaty. And I ran it at the limit at Brainerd last year, right before the event, testing. I think it was 165 miles an hour at that point. And at 165 miles an hour, the car feels awesome. Just feels planted. Brainerd's got a huge bank turn, and I was a total newbie, so I did not go through it at 165. I've never done that before, but yeah, like 150, 155, I'm like, wow, doesn't feel like anything. So yeah, we've continued to develop it. I think really the key for us is not about developing the car further, it's figuring out how to optimize the run. Sure. So that's what we're trying to do. That's what we tried to do last year, but we had all kinds of things in the way last year. And then, yeah, really, we're trying to do the same thing again this year.
Bryan, what do you got?
Well, this will be your 5th year, and you guys, in your 4 years, you have a top 20 finish each of the 4 years that you've been here. And now you're going over to grid life, and you're absolutely blowing that out of the water. So other than winning one lap overall, what are some of your goals that you're striving for the one lap?
Well, the goal now is, we podiumed, and that was like we set out like 5 goals every year. Number 1 is bring the car home in one piece, right? And number 2 is, don't hurt ourselves or annoy anybody else or hurt anybody else. And then, like 3, 4, 5 is kind of where we want to finish. And the first year was we just wanted to finish and see if we could do it. And then the first year of the Plaid run was a top 10 with sort of an outline goal of a podium. And we actually got that outline goal the first year. So now, now we're striving for the top spot. And that's obviously not easy in this event at all. So it's, still to bring the car home in one piece and ourselves as well. But I think the top spot is the next goal. And especially in the one lap, it's such a special event. It's been the reason to build the car, and it's been the primary goal for the car.
So let's talk about that for a second. So the top spot, and you heard me last year, sort of before the event and before we had to take an early exit, really curious as to what the vehicle could do. And obviously you got on the podium, but this year things have changed a little bit. Obviously tracks are becoming a little less EV friendly just because of insurance, underwriters, track owners, just afraid of the unknown and afraid of what they're being told and their knowns, so to speak, right? So to that effect, I know we've had to reword some of our rules, basically saying at this point, we make every effort to work with the tracks and find tracks that allow EVs and that are happy with them. But there's always that uncertainty if an owner gets a call or makes that decision a day before we get there or the day that we're there. No, we can't let that run. It's too much of a liability. I think with our event, because we're only doing 3 laps, there's a little less of a worry, but still there is that potential of an owner saying no. And because of that, that sort of leaves you out of DNS for that event. So it's kind of, while we don't like doing it, the rules are sort of run one at your own risk. How does that make you feel? How does that sit with you? And what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I'm glad you bring it up, because you're right. It is. In my personal estimation, I think there's sort of this swelling fear of exactly like you said, the unknown. The reality is I'm not aware of anywhere in North America a EV catching fire, much less burning in a thermal runaway scenario on any racing service anywhere in North America. It just hasn't happened. So yeah, could it happen? Maybe. I mean, but the cars are very different. They've developed in crazy ways. I guess crazy is the wrong term. They've developed fast over the years. The 2012 Teslas, that some of them would turn into a combustion or a thermal runaway. It's not the same car anymore. There's a lot of things that they've engineered into the car to prevent thermal runaway fires. Any car can catch fire, right? We know that.
Yep.
And yeah, the thermal runaway is a particular concern, but it's just I think it's we as a community and to try to help the track owners need to help educate about the improvements and what cars are less likely to catch fire than others. I think as far as it comes to the one lap, my first thought as you were talking was we don't want any special dispensation. We're there to just compete like everybody else. And if it comes up, the last thing we want is to make a stink or anything like that. We'll just deal with it as it comes um, and try to be reasonable. And the other thing that we've tried to do is bring first responder information with us to the tracks and give that to the track safety personnel. We've tried to make sure that we engineer stuff into the car and label it in a way that they can be reasonably certain they're not going to get shocked if we do end up in a tire wall or something like that. But I don't know, Andrew, if you've got other thoughts on it, but I think we're just trying to help and trying to help people find out the real data, the real get educated on the real scenarios. The car and the year of the car makes a huge difference as far as the risk, and that's probably the chief thing we're working with tracks on right now. We're working with Brainerd. We already talked to Andrew's talked to the guy at Hedge Hollow, and we're trying to help just preemptively avoid the issue, I think. So yeah.
I think like a lot of the teams for one lap that want to run up front, of course, go and pre-run all the tracks to learn them. One lap is like instant on, right? Every lap counts. Well, for us, we've been pre-running too to learn the tracks, of course, but also to make sure that they'll let us run. and last year it was, maybe that was 2 years ago, it was Carolina Motorsports Park. I went down there. Everybody said it was fine ahead of time. I got there, they're like, no, you can't run. And that was after driving 24 hours straight to try and get there.
Sure.
To make the event. That one particularly, we were able to work it out. The person that was saying, you can't run, actually didn't know what their current plan was, and they had a waiver, and blah, blah, blah. We worked it out. But yeah, over time, it's certainly a concern. That what Chad is saying is right, that the tracks just don't have quality information about the risk.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's also true of the insurers, but I haven't actually heard that. Like some of the sanctioning bodies, NASA, et cetera, they really haven't had any problem with their insurance. It's just people are worried about the cars being on fire and then damaging the track or putting the track out of service for a while. And I do think that the plan for an EV with a fire and the plan for a nice car with a fire are different, right? So it makes sense that people wouldn't know exactly what to do because you can't just follow the existing roadmap. So yeah, I think we need to keep going. The other interesting thing about that is people's attitudes about EVs change depending on where you are in the country. Like the further west you go, the more welcoming people are.
Really?
So
I mean, are we? So what's our starting point? Are we like New York, and then everybody's like, screw you, even though there's a ton of them out there? Or where's our starting point? For going west.
It could be a little bit of a dip, but like you go out, like we were out at Laguna last year and Willow Springs, and they don't even think about it. It's not even on the radar.
Well, they're building infrastructure to support charging cars. Yeah,
they have superchargers.
That's something we were actually just talking with Paul about from Hooked on Driving Maine, because they were talking with me. We had a conversation at NJMP this past weekend about how to design a program for EVs, because to your point, it's so common there. But then you get to a place like New Jersey Motorsport Park, even though they have chargers there, you can't put them on track, no matter
Right.
what. They
Right.
won't go.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. There's just, to me, I've talked with Andy a little bit about it because he's got lots of contacts. Some of the track managers like at Brainerd, like Chad's talking about, we just need to get sort of a selection of people across all the different areas, insurance, tracks, sanctioning bodies together and come up with a good plan.
So let's
And-
expand on that for a second,
Yeah.
if we can. So, I mean, I've watched you over the past few years, and you absolutely do. You have a ton of documents, a ton of paperwork with you. I've seen you speak with like the track fire marshals and everybody else, and educate them. And to be quite honest, I took a lot of the inspiration from what we need on EVs from sort of inspecting your car and say, okay, we need clearly labeled shutoff, things of that nature, because your car is fantastic as far as being very, very clear in labels. And, you know, in that, some of the discussion that we had internally was, oh, I don't know if everybody will be able to. I said, I'm pretty sure they can. You know, it's pretty straightforward from what I understand. And speaking with you guys over the years being a great source of education, does it make sense? Because I think you've hit the nail on the head, you know, to sort of form a consortium that educates, because I don't know how much Tesla themselves, you know, Brock brought this up in one of his interviews that we filmed at last year, that he believes that EVs are going to become more and more accessible, but also more and more commonplace on track due to the drop in cost. Some of the used ones people want to go ahead and refurbish and get on track. And as those barriers to entry diminish, other ones are going up. So do you form a consortium? How much is Tesla helping themselves, given that it's a market for them? And any other EV manufacturers, what do you see?
Well, I think we see that Tesla doesn't really care. They sort of dabble in setting lap times and stuff like that, I think, as sort of a maybe bragging rights. I don't know, you know. But they don't have like they don't have like a Mazda Motorsports or a Ford Performance or whatever else to support grassroots guys like us, right? So, you know, at the end of the day, they're just a company that's trying to grow, trying to put out products and trying to, you know, survive in a tough market. And
But here's a whole untapped segment for them
yeah,
that
right,
nobody in the EV world is touching right now, outside of like a Taycan or something like that.
right.
But you know, you're not going to find a 20-something-year-old who's saving up to buy a 10-year-old Taycan. You're going to see him spending the money for a for a Tesla, which is a lot more common. So, you know, Elon, if you're listening, stop it. Help. Do something useful now.
So the thing about that is, even though Tesla, the company,
Yes.
isn't doing anything, Tesla, the people that work inside of it, are interested in motorsports,
Yes.
right?
So how do you find that out? Or like, do they like send up signals in the software like we like you with the smile?
No, it's some by accident, right? You just run into oh hey, I work at Tesla. That's cool that you guys are running one lap. I mean, we don't need to name names, but we all know who we're talking about. But you know, and then you just run into other enthusiasts, and some of them are techs at Tesla, or you know, and then of course the aftermarket is a big piece of it to push it forward. So yeah,
To answer that other question though, that you started with, Salman, I think you do need a consortium. And I do think that you would need a little bit of OEM involvement in that, because the manufacturing, the design, the safety of each model is so different from each other. It's not like an ice car where they all have the same kind of parts and pieces after 100 years of development. No, they're all substantially different, and substantially different in ways that are safety impacting. So that's what I think.
I'll nominate you two as the chairman of the consortium.
Sounds
Brian,
good.
what do you got? And by the way, you shaved. I like it. I can see your face. Oh, you got the fireworks back. There you go.
Yeah.
The shaving was by accident. I tried to trim up and got it all cattywampus. So I was like, crap. The wife loves it.
There you go.
You know, talking about building the car, I went on Mountain Pass's website and saw the build and everything that they've put on this car. You know, they're guys that are running World Challenge that don't have some of the gadgets and gizmos and suspension pieces that you guys have on this car. And the other thing is, who would have ever thought to see 315s on a Tesla?
Yeah, well, they're stuffed. They're stuffed on there, especially in the front. But yeah, I mean, the Mountain Pass was such a dramatic difference for us, because Sasha is motorsports based. In other words, he raced World Challenge and other, he was a pit guy, and I don't even know all the stuff that he did, but he's been in the pits, he's developed, and he's an he's an engineer, so he designs the parts and knows how to make parts that are going to be, motorsports ready.
Woo! I'll play
Right.
with mine too.
So it's been a huge, I mean, we just can't thank them enough for making this possible, and it's fun to run this stuff for him and test it out. I mean, the Plaid build was basically a development platform for him. He developed all the parts that he now sells for the Plaid and Model S's in general. It's not as big a market as the Model 3 is for him, or really any of the aftermarket folks, just because of it's a more expensive car, right off the lot. So the Model 3s are big markets for them. And honestly, I like driving the Model 3 a little bit better because Plaid scares the daylights out of me. That's why Andy does a lot of the driving. But it's just a great chassis. The Plaid is a good chassis too, but it's big, powerful, and it takes a level of driver. There's a level you have to be above, to make that thing go fast. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
So.
Well, with the few minutes that we've got left, I think we've covered, sort of the real juicy stuff that we wanted to. Who are your sponsors this year? Who are you running for? Sort of, and what are your? Well, we've talked about your goals, but yeah, talk about your sponsors and sort of who you're running for this year.
Yeah, we of course have talked about Mountain Pass a number of times. So this is kind of like the halo car for Sasha and Mountain Pass, and yeah, he did go a little crazy when he was developing everything, which of course we benefit from, and has been a lot of fun to run. And then of course we're always feeding data back to him and sometimes to Tesla and others, so that they can continue to improve the car. We've also got Martian Wheels on the car. Drew from Martian Wheels has been a sponsor on the Plaid the whole time as well. And so we're going to run those wheels again. They might be slightly different. I know we were talking about 315s. We might end up with something slightly different this year. Just trying to optimize that wet skid pad that we always end up in 60th on or whatever.
Why? So tell me that for a second. If after you get done with your sponsors, but I'm curious as to why. Is it the driver mod, or is the car that unwieldy with understeer throughout that little small skid pad?
Is it the driver mod? Well, I mean, like, we've done fine on the dry skid pad.
Well, yeah, it's dry.
So, but like, you're just driving in a circle. I don't know. The car has been really, really terrible in the wet period, which doesn't make any sense because it's all-wheel drive and, theoretically has torque vectoring in the rear, depending on which version of software they've released and how it works and all that stuff. At one point, we think there was a real problem. We got data back to them. I think they really did fix that prior to last year's run. Last year's run,
Them being Tesla.
Yeah, to Tesla, yeah. I think last year's run is down to just we don't know how to set up the car for a wet skid pad now. And like Tesla's in the past, Chris ran 2 years ago and was like third or something. Right. And I think that same year, the Model S, which is an old one, not a Plaid generation, but that one was like first or something in the wet skid pad.
So here's my idea for you.
Yeah.
Brock always goes out in a minivan or something and sets a fairly high standard.
Yep.
Give him the car first to do the show off. And then if you don't beat him, it's the driver. If he beats you,
okay,
I'm totally fine with that. That sounds great. Let's do it.
That's great.
All right, we're down. I want to see, because I want to understand this better. And this is a data validation here, and a little bit of a sick game. So it's perfect for the one lap. So there we go.
Brock
Yep.
will break the skid pad record.
Well, it's because remember his motto, not my car, not my problem. So that's why he's always so fast with all these rental cars and other cars. You put him in his car and he's a little less, gung ho, shall we say. So yeah,
Right,
I think
right.
he's going to drive the fastest car around because it's not his. So yes, that'll be it.
And the other organization we've sort of carried as our charity sponsor is International Justice Mission, and they're pretty easy to find. They do a lot of work trying to save folks from human trafficking and enslavement, really, that there still is in the world. So we carry them with each time. I think the other big one is we lost Enrique last year and earlier this year, and my dad actually passed away last year from pancreatic cancer as well, so that hits home big. And I just want to say we also have a huge support for that. I think that kind of bleeds throughout all of us.
Look, mine was kidney and pancreas also, so completely. Yep. And Bryan, yep. So we're all in the same boat there.
Yeah.
Totally.
And so that's close to our hearts as well.
Well, that's a great cause, and we'll catch up with you throughout the week of the One Lab to make sure that we're bringing the right amount of attention to it, and we'll let people know exactly how they can contribute and make a difference throughout that as well. So great job there, guys. That's our time. Thank you so much for joining us. I was really looking forward to this, and it did not disappoint. You guys didn't disappoint. Looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks at Tire Rack. Thanks for joining. So for the 2024 Tire Rack One Lap of America presented by Grassroots Motorsport Magazine, with coverage provided this year by Hooked on Driving, Everyday Driver, and the Valente Group, I'm Solomon. That's Bryan. These are the two D-cell batteries, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.